We're going to start working on the quadratic formula, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. This is a gift. And the reason, I should never say something else where I'm trying to write something. The reason it is done after completing the square is that it is actually derived from completing the square. And I will, in a separate video, show you how to do that if you're interested. But for now, what you need to know is that you have to memorize it. Now, we've learned so many different methods to solve quadratic equations. We've learned how to graph, we've learned how to factor, we've learned how to do square roots, we've learned how to complete the square, and now we're going to try to use the quadratic formula. The great thing about the quadratic formula is that you can use it in every single situation. And so those intercepts, those x solutions, right, to the quadratic equation is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And this is derived from this equation here, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And I'll show you how, essentially, by completing the square using this, you can solve for x and get exactly this formula. It is used in all situations, and just so that you know, the a here refers to the a here, the b here refers to these b's right here, and the c to the c right here. And so when you have these three values, you just plug them in and you'll get the answers. Now, the only things that you need to remember are that, of course, a can't be 0, because if I put in a 0 here, this whole thing goes away and I no longer have a quadratic equation anyway, because a quadratic means there's an x squared term. So I can't make the x squared term go away by making this 0. The other thing that this is contingent on is that this piece in the middle, the b squared minus 4ac, which is all there, b squared minus 4ac, has to be greater than or equal to 0, because you can't have, if it's less than 0, it's negative, and you can't have a negative square root. Okay, so this is our quadratic formula, and let me show you how you're going to use it. Okay, so the quadratic formula, to do that, let me start with an example, and I'm not going to do example 1 first, I'm going to do another one. So 2x squared plus 7x equals 9. Sorry, minus 9 equals 0. So, remembering my formula, 2, this is A, 7 is B, and 9 is C. Now, it's not just enough to know the formula, it's important to know how to do the steps properly, because if you don't, you'll easily get a wrong answer. So the number one thing that you need to do is to remember almost to put parentheses in place. So I'm gonna put the quadratic formula here just so I can see it very clearly before I solve. And I'm going to substitute my values into it very slowly and carefully. Negative b, well, what goes in for b? 7. Why did I put a parentheses? Because this could be a negative number, and I don't want to lose. If this were negative 7, I'd want to make sure I have my negative 7 in here. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, 7 squared, minus 4, times a, well, a is 2, and c is negative 9. Again, I don't want to lose those negatives, over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, now I'm going to start to simplify. X equals negative 7 plus or minus, don't forget, You have to rewrite it every time. Don't take shortcuts. I promise you, some of you are going to try to take shortcuts, and then you're going to start finding that all your answers are wrong. 49 minus 7 squared is 49, minus 4 times 2 is 8, times 9 is 72, and because I have two negatives, it's going to be a positive 72 over 2a, which is 4 on the bottom. So this is going to x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 72 is 121 over 4. This is going to give me two possible answers. X equals negative 7 plus square root of 121, which is 11. Actually, just so that you can see, I'll simplify it here. Plus or minus 11 over 4. So one of the answers is negative 7 plus 11 over 4. And the second answer is going to be x equals negative 7 minus 11 over 4. And I can see that negative 7 plus 11 is 4, divided by 4 is 1. And negative 7 minus 11 is negative 18. Negative 18 divided by 4 is negative 9, over 2. And so my two answers are going to be 1 and negative 9 halves. Okay, let me do now the example in the book so that we get some practice with this. Example 1 says, (3x squared plus 5x equals 8). Now this is not usable as is because we first need to set it equal to 0. So 3x squared plus 5x minus 8 equals 0. Now we can use it because we know that a is 3, b is 5, and c is negative 8. Okay, let's put our quadratic formula down again. Let's say it with me. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, let me put my numbers in. X equals negative b is 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8 over 2 times 3. Negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared is 25. 4 times 3 is 12. Times 8 is, I believe, is 96. So plus 96 over 6. If I add 25 and 96, I get 121. So I get negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 6 equals negative 5 plus or minus 11 over 6. So I have two possible answers. I have x equals negative 5 plus 11 over 6, and I have x equals negative 5 minus 11 over 6. This first one is going to give me negative 5 plus 11 is 6, so x equals 1. The second one is going to give me x equals negative 16 over 6, which I simplify as negative 8/3. So I have two answers to this. 3x squared plus 5x minus 8, two intercepts. I have x equals 1 and x equals -8/3. I'm going to pause here and have you try guided practice number 1. And don't check the next video, which is optional, until you've done it to see if you did it correctly. I'll be back with you in a minute.